1, 2, 1, 2. Hi friends, welcome to episode 235 of the Bible Project Daily Podcast. Now you may be wondering, what is the Bible Project? Well, the Bible Project is a plan, if God wills it, that we journey together through the entire Bible, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, over how many years it takes. Now, if you've arrived here today for the first time, why not consider joining us on this amazing journey and go back to the beginning and maybe play catch up for a little while until you land where we are today, where we're at part 235, which is Genesis part 166. And today we're in Genesis chapter 21. And maybe by doing that, you can make the Bible part of the rhythm of your daily life. But today you are very welcome. And if you remember, we're continuing the story that is found in the text of Genesis chapter 1. And today we're looking from verses 14 to 21. And we're talking about the situation where Hagar and Ishmael are in the wilderness. So Abraham having sent them out from the home. So I'm going to pick up the text and just read for you a few verses 14 to 16, which tells us this. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on their shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put down the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went down and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And she sat there and she began to sob. What a sorry picture this paints. Now, you may remember that Abraham has been asked to do this, and this is a very difficult situation, but Abraham still, well, it appears in the text that he immediately obeyed. Now, I suggested in yesterday's podcast that the fact that God had fulfilled the promise may have encouraged Abraham to obey this seemingly difficult order, and in doing so, that is a demonstration in the sense that his faith is getting stronger. The result being, even though this was probably very hard for him, he trusted God, and he trusted that God knew what was best for everyone in what was, let's face it, a very complicated and convoluted family situation. Anyway, God told him to send Hagar and Ishmael out from the family encampment, and because God said it, that's what Abraham did. Now, in first reading at a superficial level, you might be forgiven for thinking that God seems to be acting pretty harshly here. But let's just read on to the rest of the story and not just leave it where it sat at the end of that verse. Because when she leaves and she's out wandering in the wilderness, and it's called the wilderness because it's what we would in effect today call the desert, she's obviously facing a difficult situation. And verse 15 suggests that she got lost and all the water's used up. And she gets to the point where she just places the boy under one of the scrub trees, probably to try and give him some shade. And she goes off to one side and she cries. So Hagar's really in deep despair at this point. But at the points of deep despair is often the same point at which God steps in. And verse 17 tells us, God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. So God hears the cries, and I would suggest the cries of the heart of Hagar as well. And at this point, he steps in and the angel of the Lord appears to her. Now, this is the angel of the Lord, this phrase again. And whenever you see that, really, I'd want to impress on you that means something very, very important is about to happen. Now, again, I'm not being dogmatic about this, But I think, and many Christians agree, that this is probably the pre-incarnate Christ, the same angel of the Lord who came earlier in order to help keep the covenant that he'd made with Abraham earlier in chapter 12. The promise that he made Abraham, that even though he had done this and fathered this first child through Hagar, the slave girl, the promise then given was that he would take care of Ishmael. God had made a promise, he's going to take care of Ishmael, and that is what he is seen to do here. Verses 18 and 19 tell us, and this is the angel of the Lord speaking, "Lift the boy up and take him by hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water, and she gave the boy a drink. I'm going to care for you. I'm going to protect you. And part of what was involved in getting them sent away from the family environment included God's plan to bless them, to fill his promise separately, and make a great nation from the line of Ishmael. Now, what that great nation came out of Ishmael, well, maybe I say, what were the great nations that came out of Israel? Well, we're seen in this story that Abraham is seen to have two sons. One of them becomes the line of the Jewish nation, and the other becomes the line of the Arab nations. So, and this is the point that we see that God opens her eyes, and she sees a well of water nearby, and she goes and refills the skin of the water, and she gives the young lad a drink, and that way they're both saved. And then it concludes this little section by telling us this: God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert, and he became an archer, and while he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. Now remember, Hagar herself was an Egyptian, and she goes and gets him an Egyptian wife. And we find out later in the biblical narrative that he ends up having 12 sons. So what we see in the fullness of this story revealed in Genesis chapter 1 is that Jacob has 12 sons that produce the Jewish nation, and Israel, Abraham's other son, has 12 sons that produce the Arab nation. So God fulfills his promise to protect and to bless Ishmael and make him a great nation, great in terms of size. These verses are simply telling us that Abraham has two sons, and Isaac and Ishmael, and he makes a covenant to cover Isaac, and he makes a different kind of promise to cover Ishmael, and he fulfills both of them here in this passage. Both of them will go on to produce great, huge nations of people, which is exactly what God said he would do from the very beginning. So what I'd like to do, well, next time is sum up by closing up this and summing up this whole chapter, but we'll begin to do that in the next episode. If you're interested, there's always a transcript available of each and every one of these talks available in the episode notes section of any audio version of the website. And there's always links through, if you're watching this as a video version of the podcast, there's always links through to the audio version where the podcast is hosted on the Buzzsprout website. And you'll find other links there as well you might find helpful or useful. But anyway, there we are. That's it for today. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow, or very soon, I trust, on the Bible Project Daily Podcast. Bye-bye for now.